Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you, Carindale family. I just want to talk to you briefly about patience, if you haven't guessed the theme. And last week we spoke around gentleness in the series of fruit that we're doing. And you might remember the catchphrase, which was easy does it. If there was a catchphrase this week, it's slowly does it. Slowly does it. And Helen was being gracious when she was sharing earlier about the fact that 4-year-olds test your patience and they help you develop into a mature person. I think 45-year-old husbands do that as well. So I think she was being gracious as she shared earlier. Friends, there was this young dad who was out with his 18-month-year-old boy shopping. Who's been there before? On his own, 18-month-year-old boy shopping. The day started okay, but an hour in, the little boy was red-faced and screaming, bellowing loudly in the pram in the shopping centre. So loud that he could be heard throughout the whole entire store. Who's been there before? Okay, yep, okay, you're still with me, that's good. The young dad was stressed and he was kind of nervous, trying to figure out how best to calm his son in public. Onlookers could see the father he was just saying, Jeremy, it's okay. Jeremy, it's okay. Jeremy, just relax. Jeremy, everything's going to be okay. While some looked on curiously thinking, I'm glad it's him and not me, and they weren't going to get involved, there was this older woman who eventually came over and she encouraged the young dad. She said to him, you're doing such an amazing job of being a dad. You're so calm and you're so assured and speaking to your son with such grace and patience. The father looked on curiously at her. She asked the young dad, how old is little Jeremy anyway? The dad laughed and said, no, I'm Jeremy. I'm Jeremy. My son's name is Brody, okay? I wonder who's ever been there. Who's ever had their patience tested recently? Who's ever lost their patience? Confession time. Who's ever lost their patience? I want you to reflect on those moments, maybe today, this week, or in the past. What did you lose it over? What did you lose your patience over? And what happens when you lose your patience? Sometimes I think, friends, the tendency when we lose our patience can be to yell at the person who is testing our patience instead of talking to ourselves. Fair call? Sometimes our tendency can be to yell at the one maybe testing our patience as opposed to talking to ourselves. In the story, the young dad, Jeremy, you knew how best to respond to the situation. The best approach often is healthy self-talk rather than yelling at others. I failed a rat test. Is that what happened? I passed a rat test. That's right, failure is positive in testing, isn't it? I passed the rat test this week, but I remember when I first went to get immunised. Who remembers that occasion? COVID immunisation time. That's a story we all get to share in, which is nice, isn't it? I remember going to what was not JB Hi-Fi, Joyce Main in Townsville. It's this big warehouse situation. They converted it into a health setting. And I remember I was trying to fit it in between appointments, so I just went in the line. I didn't have an appointment because you could do those, but you could also walk in. So I just went in and I sat in the chairs, and the way that it kind of worked is if you were waiting for the thing, you had to go to the left. If you had an appointment, you went to the right. So I'm in the left-hand bunch of chairs, and there's rows. You know how sometimes you look at it and you think, how do I get in quicker? You know, do you sit at the front? Do you kind of just push your way through? So I just sat in the chairs and I tried to observe how they made this whole system work, and the nurses did an amazing job. But as I was sitting there, you kind of start to think, how can I compete to get in? You become hyper-vigilant. I don't know if you've been in this situation. How do I get ahead of the line here? Because my needs are more important than everyone else's, obviously. How do I get to the right-hand side, which is the people that had an appointment? And I thought, I could just be dishonest and go and sit over there, you know? And if they call a name, yep, that's me, and move forward. That doesn't work when you get there, though, doesn't it? Because you need ID, so that doesn't work. But you start to think about all this stuff. How do I get there? And as I was watching, I started to think, you know, that nurse is just standing around. Everyone's waiting, everyone's busy, everyone wants a jab. They're just standing around. If they were a little more active, I might get through a little quicker. Have you ever had thoughts like that? Then you start to judge and observe and that sort of stuff. I wish there was something I could do, but you get into this mindset of impatience. I don't know if you've been there before. I have been in mindsets of impatience where in a shopping centre, and I experienced this yesterday at Chermside, when you're in a shopping centre, you start to think, look, I know the line markings say go that way, but it's just there. So I'm going to go that way. No cars. I'm just going to go against the markings. Who's ever done that? Yeah, okay. A nice one. All right. If we're not impatient, we're a bunch of liars today. That's fine. All right. Whatever. Okay. But I weigh that up. I think nobody's watching. God's okay with it, I'm sure. I'm just going to do it. You kind of justify your impatience, don't you, a little bit? Or you don't want to wait at traffic lights. Again, I'm not great with traffic lights, so I would go a lot of back streets just to avoid traffic lights, even if it takes me longer. It's a bit stupid, but that's okay. So at Townsville, you sit at a bunch of traffic lights and you have to turn left, but it takes forever. So Raffis is right there. So one thing you can do is to zip through the car park. You ever done that before? Who's the car park zipper on the corner, all right? So you zip through the car park. Giraffes know this, so they've got signs up which say, don't come in this way to zip through, basically is what they say, okay? So then you just play dumb. I didn't read the sign, sorry. I remember one time there was a police officer behind me, and I zipped through, and he knew what was going on. So then I was committed. I just had to go through drive-through. I don't even drink coffee, all right? And God's like, yeah, nice one, Brad, nice one. So I just sat in drive-through and I was later than everyone else going around the corner. It was ridiculous. This week on Pine Mountain Road, I'm getting that right, aren't I? Pine Mountain Road. I always say Pine Oak Road. Pine Mountain Road. Well, if you didn't know, the golf course is undergoing renovations and I was on the way to Rotary Doug. This is my excuse. Timed it perfectly in my head. And I get there and there's a bank of cars because there's a truck moving on the way through, all right? Now, I'm not a truck driver, but I know how to drive trucks in my head. So I'm in the line thinking, I missed that opportunity, I'm going to be late for Rotary. And I'm just watching the stop-go text, I'm watching the truck, and he's basically inching his way into backing it in. And I thought, come on, mate. Like, surely you can go faster than that. Look at all these cars. So that's my mental dialogue. And then I thought, I'm going to be late, and I've got this pitiful excuse of being in traffic. Yeah, everyone uses that one. And then I saw cars start to U-turn. Like, they'd had enough. They U-turn out of it, and they go off-road, and they kind of work their way around it. And then you start to look at the Tech-Go technicians, and you think, just do something. Can't you just do something to solve this problem? And this is the mental dialogue you go through. Anyone would think I have a patience issue. What do you reckon? But God says to me, I didn't act out of that. I was just a mental dialogue. I'm giving you insights into my mind here. God says to me, slowly does it. It's okay. You're going to be late, and that's okay. Get a grip. Isn't that nice? And then the voice of reason, which we often say to Heavy, came into my head, which was calm your farm. Calm your farm. You ever say that to yourself? Maybe you need to say it to yourself today. Calm your farm. Friends, part of the problem, I think, in our lives, in our society, is that we've lost sight of the importance of waiting. We've actually lost sight of the importance of waiting, and our expectations are skewed. Because waiting in itself, waiting is not a deviant part of existence that we should strive to avoid. It's not a deviant part of existence that we should strive to avoid. But the reality is we don't like to be delayed. We hate to wait. The Aussies lost against France this morning, if you didn't know that, in the Union. All right, we lost against France. All right. One person not to keep waiting is a French referee. We learned that a few weeks ago, so don't keep the French referees waiting. But we're impatient because we've created a reality where we have many expectations. We create this reality where we have many and multiple expectations, and we think limited time. There's this inherent tension within our world and our lives. Many expectations, and we think limited time. And it's a cocktail for impatience to boil over. You may have heard the cliche, and you may have said it. So much to do, so little time. Who said that? We say it like it's a virtue. So much to do, so little time. Almost becomes a life mantra. Rushing to do things, and anyone who gets in the way is a problem to be impatiently bypassed. Well, you know, we're not alone, because there's stories in the Bible where people don't wait on God and they took matters into their own hands time and time again, and it didn't go well. Adam and Eve, Abraham, the promise of children with Hagar, Solomon, more and more wives, eventually more wealth. It didn't go well. David, he was impulsive, adultery, murder. The Israelites, they wanted an earthly king like all the other nations. They wanted things a certain way, and now Peter in the New Testament, Judas. It's challenging not to get caught up in the deception of having what we want and having it now. And in some ways, it's understandable, because if you had the choice between having something straight away or waiting for it, what would you choose? If somebody said you could have it now, or you could wait 6 weeks, you'd choose probably now. But this life of instant gratification, see, it's the unintended consequences of our choices in our world. The life of instant gratification ultimately results in being impulsive and entitled. Impulsive and entitled, that's the outworking of it. Have we lost the art of waiting patiently? Psalm 24:14 says, "Wait for the Lord, be strong and let your heart take courage, wait for the Lord." Implication, don't run ahead. Don't simply take matters into your own hands. Psalm 37, "Be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him." We're so caught up in achieving. We are so caught up in arriving, in acquiring, in manufacturing, in eventually manipulating and controlling. But what if a vital point of life, what if the point of life, in some respects, was to wait? To learn to wait well, not to grumble or complain. Indeed, as we embrace waiting, you find that patience develops. As you embrace waiting, you will find that patience will develop. And patience, friends, as we read in the scriptures, is a holy characteristic of Jesus. It's the mark of a mature Christian. If you're patient, it's the mark of a mature Christian. James in chapter 5, verses 7 to 11, writes about this idea of patience, all right? And he talks about the fact that patience is an act of faith. When we are patient, we evidence our trust in God. He encourages us to be patient when circumstances are uncontrollable. When circumstances are uncontrollable, be patient. And he gives the example of a farmer, this organic example of a farmer. The farmer is patient through all seasons. The farmer does what he can, but ultimately, the crop is up to the whim of God and creation. Ultimately, the farmer is patient with so much in uncontrollable circumstances. James says, be patient when others are against you. And he cites the prophets. He talks about the fact that the prophets themselves were often maligned and faced resistance and judgment and alienation, and people that actually didn't heed their words. The prophets had to be patient when others and circumstances are against them, and us today. And he says, be patient when pain is unbearable or unexplainable. Be patient when you're encountering pain that doesn't seem to make sense, that takes you to the limit. And he gives the example of Job, in the life of Job, being patient. If you didn't know, the Greek word in the New Testament for patience actually is kind of the origin word for a thermos or thermometer. And it means to suffer long before giving up. To suffer long before giving up. Long suffering. This idea about it takes a long time for us to boil over. A long time for us to boil over. We are a slow boil. That we don't get hot-headed easily. We have a long fuse. We don't get heated with people. And I think part of the problem then is we've got to learn to keep the flames low. We've got to keep the flames low. We've got to be patient, which means keep the heat of your life low. For some, we are that charged emotionally that it doesn't take much to tip us over. It doesn't take much to tip us over. This message was central to Paul's agenda, friends, when he writes to the church in Corinth, a community that was very much at odds with each other. And Paul reminds them in 1 Corinthians 13 that love is patient. Helen read from that passage earlier. Love is patient. And I think we know the passage reasonably well. If you didn't realise, the two first statements, love is patient, love is kind, is the affirmation. They're positive statements. And then he spends the rest of the time telling us what love isn't. What love isn't. Because he was talking about specific issues in that community that he was addressing. But these two positive statements, love is patient, love is kind. Paul says that before anything else, love is patient. Which is shocking, because sometimes I think we struggle with patience with those who are closest with us, actually, sometimes. Love is patient. Love is patient. Not when people do what you want. Not when people say what you want. Not when kids respond as you expect. Love is patient with everyone all the time. Love is patient. We are known by our love for one another. Love is patient. We are known by our patience with one another. Ephesians 4 says, I urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling to which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness and patience. There's some fruits for you. Bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So it's one thing for us to believe this, to kind of understand this. It's another for us to live like this. How do you live in the patience of God? How do we keep patient with ourselves and with each other? I think we need to actually submit to God and change our flawed expectations. That's one area. We need to change our flawed expectations. One being, life isn't about me. Life is not about me. Others do not simply exist to live as I expect them to live. I tend to find that my impatience is often a byproduct of my own self-centeredness or arrogance. We need to remember that we're all imperfect. We're all sinners in need of grace. We're all works in progress. I don't know if you realise that. We're all works in progress. We're all unfinished and incomplete. Right? I don't know who's happy about that. I'm quite happy about that. We're all engaged in the ever-unfolding dynamic of being created, of working out our salvation, of growing, of being refined, of failing and getting up and going again, of being shaped and moulded by God each and every day. The problem is, for some of us, we look upon others around us and we expect that they're almost like that we're cars in a sales room ready to go off the lot. When in reality, most of life is like a mechanic's shop, okay? It's like a mechanic's shop. And when you understand that, when you get that we're all in this workshop of life, being refined and moulded and transformed moment by moment, sometimes taking steps backwards, sometimes taking steps forward. When we get that about ourselves and each other, we have more patience. We have more understanding. Philippians 1 says, God began doing a good work and he will continue it until it's finished. Guess what? When? When is it finished? When Jesus comes again. When Jesus comes again. I'm pretty sure he hasn't come yet. Fair call? I'm pretty sure he hasn't come. He's still to come, and that means we're still being worked on. Some of us, though, I think, are actually impatient about him coming again. Who's been there before? Jesus just come again. And there's lots of people, and even church tradition at times, who spend a lot of energy trying to predict that and read the signs and the times and all sorts of stuff. And it can actually feed impatience, all right? We've got to be careful of that in itself, being impatient about God coming again. When you feel like you're losing your patience with your wife, with your husband, with your son, with your daughter, your father or mother, with your students, with your teachers, with the casual employee at Woolies earning at $8.50 an hour, the waiter at Nando's, who perhaps ironically keeps you waiting, the neighbour mowing at 6 a.m, the telly salesman from Melbourne who calls you at dinner, the Uber driver who picks you up 15 minutes late for a hair appointment. Just remember, God's still working on them too. God is still working on them too. And the journey of salvation and discipleship is perpetually ongoing for everyone this side of Jesus' return. Everyone's journey is unique and we all travel at our own pace. Who's ever grown really impatient with someone in your effort to get them to do what you want, to live as you think they should live because you know what's best for them? You ever done that? And has it worked out as you'd hoped? Has it worked out as you hoped? We talk to parents pretty readily who grieve some of the choices their adult kids are making, who grieve some of those choices. But the importance of being perpetually patient cannot be underestimated even in those times. Don't try and fix others. Scripture tells us to pray, be patient and kind with them, and allow God to do his part, however long it takes. Sometimes we can lack patience with others or a situation, friends, because we lack insight and understanding. Proverbs 14 says this: "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but the one who is quick-tempered displays folly." You may have heard a story about teachers, and this kind of happened certainly decades ago, but a teacher who loses patience with a student because he wasn't responding in class, he wouldn't read, or do his homework. He lost interest, he was disengaged, and he was interrupting others. And the teacher lost patience with him one day and sent him to the office, only to realise, after they did some testing and asked him some key questions, that he needed glasses. You may have heard stories like that. The teacher didn't have the understanding about what was going on, so they made lots of assumptions about the behaviour. Patient people, friends, have great understanding, or they seek that out. Slowly does it. Don't be quick to judge or speak. I haven't been a teacher, but often in the workplace you deal with colleagues or employees who, for different reasons, produce at different levels. You know, their output is different depending on what's happening for them. And again, sometimes you can misread it or judge a situation, but it's really important when you're going into those situations to just seek to understand. To seek to understand. Help me to understand why you've been late. Help me to understand why you didn't get it done. As we exhibit patience with others, friends, we find, again, a way to heal and transform. Be patient. Seek to understand how this has happened before responding. But why should we be patient with others ultimately? Why should we be patient with others ultimately? And Helen echoed this before. Because God is eternally patient with us. God is eternally patient with us. We all have our ideas, our plans, our schedules, our agendas. Proverbs 16 says, "People may make plans in their mind, but the Lord decides what they will do." People may make plans, but the Lord decides what they will do. Friends, if we are to grow in patience, we need to wait on the Lord. I'm going to invite the musos to come up. We need to learn to wait on the Lord. Again, practice the art of waiting. Do we seek God each day? Do we lay our ideas before Him? Do we submit our plans and expectations to God? In pastoral supervision this week, and this has come up a few times, the value of gathering, particularly in ministry or if you're a part of a team, of gathering as a team, of gathering as a couple, even in the home as parents, and praying each day or each week or each month and laying down your calendar before God together to say, "Lord, I've got an idea about what I'm doing today or what I'm planning to do this week, but I'm just laying it before you. Give us insight, give us grace, give us understanding. Take charge of my life and my routine." Because one of the greatest steps of faith that you can take, friends, is to simply wait on God. To wait on God. Waiting is often harder than taking control and acting impulsively when things aren't going as they should. Remember, God's perspective and timing is perfect and often different from ours. Life is uncertain and unpredictable at times. God calls us to be patient, to wait on Him because He is above all. Whether it's a habit that you're seeking to change today, a situation or a problem that's yet to be resolved, a relationship that's in strife, a vision or a promise that's yet to be realised, in uncertain times, in the midst of painful situations, may we learn to trust and wait on the Lord. You know, I thank God for His eternal patience with me, with each of us, and may we live evermore patiently with ourselves and with one another. Friends, I encourage you to practice waiting this week. I encourage you to step out of line and let somebody in. I encourage you to sit there and use the time at traffic lights proactively and pray. I encourage you to find opportunities to delay your own gratification for the sake of blessing others. Because when you walk in the art of waiting, you'll find that you actually enjoy being patient. It's a pleasure. It's a virtue. Strength will rise as we wait upon the Lord. Slowly does it. Slowly does it. Friends, we're going to stand and sing and worship and pray. If you feel God is calling you to come and pray and you need some support, the way of prayer is always open. But in these moments, I invite you just to stand. to take a breath, to press pause on whatever thoughts are running through your head, and just wait on the Lord. Just wait on the Lord. Slowly does it. May we be a people evermore who live in patience.